It's the Real News Network. I'm Sharmini Pires coming to you from Baltimore. New York's Governor Cuomo signed an executive order on Sunday ordering the state agencies under his control to divest themselves of companies and organizations aligned with the pro-Palestinian boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. Let's take a look at what he had to say.
Today I'm going to sign an executive order that says very clearly we are against the BDS movement, and it's very simple. If you boycott against Israel, New York will boycott you. If you divert revenues from Israel, New York will divert revenues from you. If you sanction Israel, New York will sanction you. Period.
Baha Azmi, who's the legal director for the Center for Constitutional Rights, says Cuomo's actions violates First Amendment protections of free speech and is a form of 21st century McCarthyism. Joining us now from Chicago to discuss this is Ali Abunimah. He is the co-founder of the award-winning online publication, The Electronic Intifada. His latest book is titled The Battle for Justice in Palestine. So good to have you back with us, Ali.
Thank you, Sharmini.
So, Ali, New York's move is testimony to the fact that the BDS campaign is a serious threat and that it is working. What do you make of this announcement of Cuomo?
Well, there's a couple of notable things. First of all, if you see the official photographs or watch the video of the signing ceremony, the Israeli consul general, in other words, an Israeli government official, was literally standing over the shoulder of Governor Andrew Cuomo as he signed this executive order. And that's very symbolic of the fact that this kind of very repressive legislation designed to try to shut down the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement has been directly pushed by the Israeli government in state legislatures at the federal level, in other countries as well, in France and various cities all over the world. The other thing, what is unprecedented about this, and Cuomo seems to have boasted about it in his speech, is that this was an executive order. It was a decree by the executive branch in New York. And that's a little bit of a shift because we've seen in now 9 states have passed anti-BDS laws. But increasingly, what we're seeing is that these repressive anti-BDS laws are facing different kinds of obstacles. There was a law in California that was basically gutted before it was passed by the lower house. There was a bill in Virginia that basically was shelved. And indeed, the most repressive version of the New York anti-BDS law has been facing obstacles in the New York legislature. So Cuomo himself said that, the advantage of an executive order is that it allows you to get around what he called the tedious legislative process. In other words, democracy is a very tedious thing when you're trying to shore up Israeli apartheid. But the big problem with this decree and all those laws is that they fundamentally violate First Amendment rights, free speech rights in many different ways.
And let's go through those different ways because as you can see, this is, as you stated, this is something that is taking place in other cities and universities and other institutions, this anti-BDS movement.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, this is a sign that the BDS movement, boycott, divestment, and sanctions, is proving to be a very effective way of holding Israel accountable for its abuses of Palestinian rights and putting pressure on Israel to change using a time-honored, non-violent tactic. And this is really a conundrum for Israel because Israel cannot defend its occupation, its settlement building, its repeated attacks on Gaza and its mass killings of civilians. And so, what you see is this broad-based civil society movement led by Palestinians that is taking shape to challenge Israel and to challenge the companies that are complicit in these abuses. And the problem for Israel is that back in 1982, the US Supreme Court actually ruled that boycott is a form of free speech protected by the First Amendment. In other words, it enjoys the highest protection of the US Constitution. And so what these laws try to do, they can't ban me or you or anyone else for calling for the boycott of Israel. They can't do that. So what they try to do instead is to stigmatize and marginalize people. And in the case of this decree in New York and other laws that have been passed around the country, you actually will have the state government compiling a blacklist of institutions and companies who are accused by the state of supporting the BDS movement and punishing them and sanctioning them and saying, just as Cuomo said, you know, if you boycott Israel, the state of New York will boycott you. This is really extraordinary because it's saying that the state has the right to determine which political opinions are acceptable. And if your political opinion is not acceptable to the state of New York or the governor of New York, then you will be excluded from state contracts, which have nothing to do with your political views on Israel or Palestine or anything else. You may be a contractor that provides a service, a legitimate service. You may be the best person to do it. But if you have political views that the state doesn't like, then you would be punished by being excluded. So this is the tack that they're taking.
Ali, it is clear what's in it for Israel, and as you described, representatives of the Israeli state were standing behind Governor Cuomo. Governor also addressed the nature of the U.S. alliance with Israel, citing its strategic location as well as its military relationship. Let's have a look.
We have learned that the alliance serves us both extraordinarily well. The Iron Dome in Israel. What a beautiful example of collaboration and what you can do when you collaborate. Israel's location is a strategic advantage for this nation. Israel's knowledge of terrorism is a strategic advantage. We're relative newcomers to this battle, but Israel has done it every day for decades.
Ali, what's in it for New York in terms of this move?
Well, as one person who looked at this said, this is obvious pandering. This is political. We know that New York is the state with the largest Jewish population. Of course, not all Jews in New York support Israel, and there is significant opposition to Israel among New York's Jewish community. But tremendous, there's a long tradition of pandering to pro-Israel Jewish organizations in New York and indeed across the United States. And certainly that's nothing new in the state of New York. But, when you listen to what the governor just said, I mean, if you take at face value the things he said, I don't happen to agree with it, but if you take at face value the claim that Israel is such a major strategic asset to the United States, that ought to be self-evident. You shouldn't need government decrees and laws effectively punishing people for taking positions on human rights issues. I mean, the United States has a very close relationship with Canada, a trade relationship, a security relationship, and so on. But I don't know of a single state in the United States that has passed a law basically trying to punish people for criticizing Canada. So, the question really is why does Israel play this extraordinary role in our politics? And why are politicians like Cuomo, and we've seen this in Illinois and in California and around from, coast to coast, why are they taking a position that if you support the human rights of Palestinians, you have to be punished. And I think that a key part is that, you know, the growth of the BDS movement, that this decree will definitely not stop, the growth of the BDS movement reflects a deeper political and demographic change in this country. And I know that we've talked about it before, that the base of the Democratic Party, young people, millennials, people of color, are more and more supporting Palestinian rights and see boycott, divestment, and sanctions as legitimate and effective means to struggle for Palestinian human rights. And that's why you have elitists like Cuomo, like Hillary Clinton, like others slamming the BDS movement, because the BDS movement is democracy in action. And there's nothing that people like Cuomo and the bigwigs of the Democratic Party and the Republican Party hate more than democracy in action.
And finally, Ali, now you used the word criminalization, as did Omar Baghouti in an email to the New York Times. Is this criminalization of dissent?
Well, the thing to be very clear, and it's important for viewers not to be confused by this, your right to call for boycott of Israel is protected by the Constitution. No one, not Governor Cuomo, not Congress in Washington, can outlaw your right to call for, organize, mobilize for boycott of Israel or boycott of anything else you want to boycott. As we've seen recently, the boycotts of North Carolina and Mississippi and other states that passed discriminatory anti-LGBT laws were boycotted, and nobody said that's an illegitimate tactic. So our right to boycott is constitutionally protected. But what these laws try to do is introduce backdoor punishments and to marginalize people and to really, you have the governor of New York on primetime television saying that people who call for boycott of Israel are bad people. They're extremists. So there's an effort to stigmatize, to use the power of the state to stigmatize people and bully them into conforming and to punish them, use the state's coercive power to punish them through, economic deprivation of contracts and other opportunities. So in that sense, it is very repressive, but they can't outlaw speech in the United States. In France, on the other hand, we've seen even more repressive laws and legal judgments which really do try to criminalize BDS, where you could even be fined or potentially imprisoned for calling for the boycott of Israeli goods, or even wearing a T-shirt that says boycott Israeli apartheid. So it's a real serious thing, but it's very telling that Israel and its lobby groups have to turn to this kind of repression because the BDS movement is growing with victory after victory. We've seen major corporations announce they're getting out, like G4S, like Veolia, like Orange. Right now, there's a major campaign focusing on Airbnb because it profits from the renting out of settlement homes in the occupied West Bank, homes built on land stolen from Palestinians. So Airbnb is now the focus of campaigns by BDS activists. And you can't outlaw that. You can't stop it. You can't stop people going into the street and making a moral argument and saying, don't go to North Carolina because they discriminate against transgender people. Don't go to Israel or don't buy Israeli goods because of what they're doing to Palestinians. This is called democracy, and it can't be outlawed.
All right, Ali Abunimah, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us on the Real News Network.